Welcome to Synth Seeker. Today I'm going to share a few Max for Live devices that I've built that you can download and use. Well, what do they do? Well, they are two things. First, there are bank patch control devices for hardware synths. These are the synths that currently make up my hardware, and as I add new ones over time, I'll add more devices. Second is a simple Midi Control Change or CC device. You can find these online and you can make one yourself in about 10 minutes in Max for Live. You don't have to use mine, you can build your own. And I include it as a convenience, but I'm going to show how I use it and why it's useful for me. It may be useful for you as well. I build simple tools that are useful specifically for my workflow, and I sometimes share them just in case they prove useful to other people. It's like this. I find it useful in my workflow. If your workflow is similar to mine, then it might be useful to you too. So here you go. Download them, check them out. Links are in the description. If it helps, great. Leave a comment so I can get a warm fuzzy about community. This video assumes a few things. It assumes you understand a bit about MIDI with respect to Ableton Live, specifically how bank, patch, and control change messages work and why they're useful. It also assumes you have at least one piece of hardware, a hardware synth, that's the same as mine. Otherwise, this isn't going to be useful for you. So some of these tools will only work with specific synths. So for example, if you use the Moog Minotaur patch control plugin, which I'll talk about shortly, and you use it to try and control a Korg Minilog, it's not going to work. It may not work. It probably will not work because I don't know what the patch change structure is for Korg Minilog. It may work, but not completely or do weird things. The name of the tool says what hardware it definitely works for. Okay, and the CC tool works with anything, but we'll get to that in a minute. So what do you do with this? Okay, first, download the pack. It's a zip file. Link is in the description. Open that up. You want to add that folder or get the files inside it. You want to move them into your Ableton user library. It's up to you where they go. If you don't know what the Ableton user library is or how it works, please go read the fine manual over at ableton.com. Okay, again, link is in the description. It's a useful thing. For now, I'm just going to drag this into my Places section, and we'll work with it from there for this demo. So let's look at the synth patch controls, okay? There's one for each piece of hardware that I own. Drag one of the patch control devices into a MIDI track. And remember, you have to actually have the hardware named in the device, okay? Otherwise, all bets are off. So let's drag in a Minotaur control. Now in that MIDI track, you're going to need to route the MIDI from that track out to your Minotaur in this case, okay? Or whatever your hardware synth is. Maybe you use USB MIDI, maybe you use DIN MIDI. It's fine either way, it doesn't matter. You probably want to use the external instrument device like so. We'll drop that in and set the port and channel that our Minotaur is sitting on and select the audio channel that it's coming into Ableton on. And now we should have sound. If your Minotaur has up-to-date firmware, you can move through its patches on its front panel by holding down the glide button and pressing the OS1 or OS2 buttons to move forward and backwards through the presets that it has stored. I think 127 of them. But there is no visual indication of which patch is currently enabled, and to reach from the glide button over to the OS button with one hand, in order to do that, you have to physically be like Lana Kane. In order to do it with a single hand. And so the device makes this easier. The Minotaur supports, as I said, 127 preset patches. So just crank the dial, right? And you'll flip through those patches. You'll see the lights changing. You'll hear it changing, patches underneath. And then the dial indicates what patch you're currently on. You can set it and forget it, or automate it, or map it to a control knob, whatever. It's simple, and it makes my life way easier. So there are other ways to control patch changes in Ableton, right? You can put bank and patch numbers onto clips, and when those clips launch, they'll send that change message. That works just as well. But I like to have a knob that I can go grab when needed, or I can map it as part of a larger control scheme. As I said, there are 7 devices, one for each piece of hardware that I mentioned, ones that I own. And if you want to build your own, take mine apart, look at how it works, and build your own. It's not hard. Anyone can do this. Go nuts and have fun with that. All right. The final device isn't hardware specific, and it's like stupidly simple, right? absolutely anyone can make this. I think it's one of the demos in the how do I learn how to program Max for Live. It's just a single knob connected and a text box. You type in the CC number into the text box that you want to control, and then the knob just sends values for that CC down the chain to whatever synth you have it routed to. So you use it to control any parameter you want. For example, on the Minotaur, the LFO will sync to MIDI, but there's nothing on the front panel that will let you turn that on and off or change the timing division of the speed of that LFO. You can't do it with the front panel, but there are CCs in the manual for it. So you can open up the manual, go to the table that shows where it is and say, oh, LFO MIDI sync, control change number 87, and any value from 0 to 63 means it's off, and any other value from 64 to 127 means it's on. So you can turn on and off MIDI sync, which you can't do in the front panel. You can do it with this little knob here, right? Really easy. LFO sync clock divider is CC 86, right? And there's a table that tells you which note divisions are which values on the dial. Really easy to use, super useful. So use this to control any parameter you like. Now, why is it just a device with a single knob, right? Why isn't it a bank of 8 knobs or 16 knobs or a bunch, right? I want to control more than one, obviously. Well, because I personally like fine control over the setup, right? You can put in as many of these or as few as you want, and you can wrap it all in a MIDI effects rack and use the macro knobs there if you want to, and do multiple mappings. These little devices don't add any latency, like none. I've tested up to 128 of them in a single chain, and the latency just remains at 0 milliseconds. Though I suppose if you have a really old machine, it might add up, but my iMac is 6 years old, and it handled 128 devices across 7 tracks just fine. I use this device and other built-in devices to build hardware synth channel strips is sort of what I do here. And then I save these channel strips as templates. So it makes getting a hardware synth up and running in Ableton just a single click, literally, like boom, Minotaur, boom, Hydrasynth, boom, Roland Jupiter. It's that easy. There's no configuration. It's just way easy. And the parameters that I want to have hands-on control for, I just drop in these little CC controls, map them to the ones I care about for a specific song or a specific performance that I'm doing, and I can change them between performances. It just is very flexible, very easy, and it loads only the things I need. And this cuts down on things like, can I use VSTs to control all of these synths? Yeah, almost all these synths come with some sort of virtual instrument or virtual control panel that I can load in. But all of that stuff tends to make the system a little more unstable. Doing it this way, I have a stronger sort of feeling of confidence that it's not going to crash. Although I've only had Ableton crash once during a live performance over the last 2 years. So, your mileage may vary, but I'm a bit of a control freak too. So I do it this way. You do it the way that works for you. If these tools are useful for you, have fun with them. So that's it. I hope this is fun and useful for you. Download links are again in the description. And do like and subscribe if you found this entertaining or useful. And as always, you have been watching Synth Seeker. Have a great day.